Today on Co-op for Two, the finale of New York Noir Improv, Hungry Hearts. It's Sunday, January 26th, 2024. My name is Jesse Reichler. If you're just stumbling onto this channel and you haven't joined us for the last 6 weeks, this will make no sense and you should stop watching. But for the rest of you, this is an exciting day because we're going to read our final letter, a little bit bittersweet, but we are going to get a solution to the case of the Hungry Hearts. I know I'm not the only one dying to see how it turned out, how close we were, and hear some final words from Alice, hopefully. All right, let's do a little bit of bookkeeping first. YouTube says 14 people in the channel. 3 likes. I do always appreciate when you give these videos a thumbs up. We've got the normal culprits in the channel, but some new people as well, or some newer faces. Okay, let's do a little bit of bookkeeping before we get started here. Last week, what day of the week did I play it? The last game we played on the channel was a live stream of a game called Under Suspicion. No, not Under Suspicion, Until Proven Guilty, the case of the Starry Sky necklace, a courtroom set case with some little twists, mechanics. Looked like it was going to be very light and trivial, turned out to be pretty engaging. And for $13, I don't think you can go too far wrong. Yesterday, I went to a local gaming convention here in Champaign, Illinois called Winter War, focused more on old school miniatures games. A long-running convention, been running since 1970 something, one of these old school things. And I ran a case of New York Noir. Someone came to play the wrong book, played for about 4 hours, a little bit longer. They seemed to be quite into it, enjoying it. Didn't finish, but we knew that that case is a very hard case. But I always enjoy running games of New York Noir. I learn something each time, and I just get maybe a little bit better at explaining it. And more than anything, though, I think each little time that I run a game, it does force me to sort of get everything in order, get the most recent version of the documents printed out. And then I asked them if I could set up a little table and just sit there on the floor with my materials in case I could. My strategy for setting up shop at a convention, which I've done a couple times now, mostly these very small conventions in Champaign where it's not really the audience for the game. And there's never been someone who's come up and had been really interested in it. But I'm not trying to sell the game. I'm up there trying to find that one person who's a writer who might click with the game and write cases for us. That's my system. My system is to go put myself out there, and one of these days someone's going to spot it who loves noir, loves writing mystery cases, and is just dying to write cases for the world to play. I haven't found them yet, but my fingers are crossed that one of these days I'm going to strike gold. Okay, what else should we talk about? I guess going forward, I'm feeling like I'm in the mood to play a puzzle type game. So I think maybe in the next couple days we might play a Deadbolt Mystery Society game or one of the other puzzle games that have arrived recently. And then we'll continue our playthrough of the Second Curse of the Seventh Citadel at some point with short notice. Matt is making a joke, I think, about ciphers. All right, so let's talk about what we're going to do here for this finale. We have the final solution reply for our case. We have the solution we sent in, which I think we should read. When we finish reading the solution letter, I also have been asking Matt this whole time to keep a little diary, keep track, keep notes on his experience writing the case. Any things he changed, any things that surprised him, etc. So Matt did write up a little afterward, sort of a his experience writing the case and playing it. And I do want to read that today. And I think then we should talk about the experience, talk about our favorite parts, maybe the parts that didn't quite work, and try to give constructive criticism. And maybe that's the good way to lead into this last little preliminary before we started. It's easy to take for granted and forget how magical this last 6 weeks experience has been. Where essentially Matt has volunteered on his own time to create a one-off case just for us. We've been playing it for 6 weeks. You can see how much effort he's gone into, how much writing he's done, just so that we could play this case once. That takes a very special kind of person, and it is a special kind of experience, a one-off experience. Now, I have said I do hope to be able to turn this into a play-by-mail case that other people can play for New York Noir eventually, but it's a pretty remarkable system. And not only that, I mean, Matt did this once before for us, set in a Sherlock Holmes case, but not only was he thrown into this new genre, creating a case, but he's made use of the documents and maps and directories for New York Noir. And he's basically taken on all sorts of different things and juggled them. And it's been mostly phenomenal. And I think it's a testament to Matt that all of us playing seem to have fallen in love with the plucky 15-year-old daughter of Wiggins, who's our detective that we've been sending out. And I think I speak for most of us that we want to see more of. We want to see Alice set up her own detective shop and start running cases. In fact, maybe we'll put her into the New York Noir directory so that people can visit her on future cases. Maybe we can give her a little PI shop downtown in the financial district and let her run cases over there. I'd love to play more cases with her. So anyway, I think we should, at the end, try to treat this like an experiment. This really was an experiment. And Matt's been very gracious and willing to put himself out there with a real time pressure. Each week, we give him our replies. He has a couple days to write 8 pages of replies. No one can play test any of this. It's all being play tested live. So, so everyone knows, though, that the nature of this channel is for us to look for ways to learn from these experiences and look for ways to offer constructive criticism. So we will try to point out places where it didn't work or things didn't quite work as well as they could have and offer suggestions. And I hope you'll stick around and add your comments to this chat or post them if you're watching this afterwards as replies to the comments. All right, let's read what we sent in quickly. Let's read what we sent in last week as our solution to the case. Okay, our theory of the case. This may have some typos since we just wrote it quickly online, but we're certain the main villain in our case is Jimmy Cunningham. Fairly certain that he, operating alone, is responsible for the arson and death of Hamoud and wife. His main motivation was to frame Michael Lant. This is not the solution. This is our theory that we sent in last week. Okay, his main motivation was to frame Michael Lant to get him out of the way so that he could lure away Mrs. Lant, whom he was desperately and madly in love with. Essentially, what we have here is a crime of passion, the old story in the book. Okay, regarding financial misbehavior, which is what the case seemed like it was all about. Cunningham was Sawyer Hartman's secret source, providing insider information to Sawyer, who then distributed to his high-value clients. Evidence for this can be found in the deciphered notes from Hartman to Hamoud, also receiving Hartman's notes with Dean Kimmel. We don't at this point believe that this information is a chargeable crime. But maybe some insider info was leaked by Margaret Layton. We do not believe that any of the other card players were involved in the murder of Hamoud or are likely prosecutable for financial crimes, especially given the current state of the stock market. It is conceivable that Hartman and Kimmel and Cunningham could be charged with insider trading, though it seems unlikely. Their general MO was to short stocks. We talked a lot about it. We got a little financial education here in shorting stocks. You basically borrow them when you think they're overvalued, you sell them, you hope they drop in value, at which point you rebuy them and then give them back. As long as they drop in value, you make money. If they go up in value, you're screwed. Financial crimes may want to consider and talk to Margaret Layton. She may have provided key information on AT&T, overvalued, etc. She was a friend of Cunningham and likely provided info she should not have. Okay, or he should not have. We cannot be entirely sure whether Cunningham intended to kill Hamoud and his wife. This was sort of my last piece of the puzzle when we were trying to understand why kill Hamoud, and I hypothesized that he may not have actually. There were 2 possibilities I considered. One is that Hamoud figured out what he was doing, that he was lying to everyone to put Michael against him, and that maybe Cunningham just intended for Michael to get arrested so he could run away with his wife, didn't actually intend for Hamoud and wife to die, just wanted to start this arson, frame Michael for it, and get him arrested for that. Maybe it went too far and he got arrested, or Hamoud learned about things and he had to be gotten rid of. Those are our 2 theories, and here we are laying them out. We can't be sure if he meant to kill them or he maybe just intended the arson to get Lant arrested. We believe the main motivation was simply to frame Lant, get him out of the way. He may have intended to start fire, not to kill them. Alternative, maybe he had been lying to Hamoud and Lant about each other, setting them against each other. Could be that Hamoud suspected and confronted Cunningham, leading Cunningham to feel he had to be eliminated. And then we listed some evidence. Miss Lant can confirm Cunningham's asking her to leave her for Want. Detective Cohen can confirm Cunningham was feeding police info against Michael Want while pretending to be his friend. Hardware store owner will recognize that this guy bought the rope. He may be able to identify Cunningham in a lineup. Cunningham had easy access to the Want house. Remember, he had a spare key within the same building. We think he stole the shoes to leave at the prints of the arson scene, planted the footprints, covered up his nearby footprints. Quite possible building doorman. We were giving advice where we thought the police might be able to get more evidence. Quite possible building doorman can confirm Cunningham presence in Lot building while Lots were out. Cunningham had easy access to the game cards with Lot's fingerprints. We suspect talking to other card players in the group, it will become clear that Cunningham was lying to all sides to create a fake feud between Hamoud and Lot. We know Cunningham was staking out the Lot residence. That's Alice saw him. We followed him. He knew Lot was working in his office and wouldn't have a good alibi. We're confident Cunningham will also not have an alibi for the arson. May have been spotted near the Lot's work, looking up at the building, etc. Maybe a cleaner at the building would be able to give Lot an alibi, since we know he was sleeping at his office. So we're suggesting ways to find an alibi. We never found an alibi ourselves, but here's ways you might. Then here's our commentary about the original case as presented to us was about cheating at cards, which was one of the cool elements of this case, how it shifted. We'll talk about that at the end. Regarding the original case of potential cheating at cards that we were originally hired on about, deciphered message suggests that either there was no actual cheating or that it was simply a case of businessmen trying to flatter and put potential clients in a good mood for sales. Also possible passing of cards in the game was part of passing encryption keys for the encrypted messages. With the stakes of a murder suspect, we suspect that Hartman will, with the stakes of a murder, like when he's threatened by the cops, that he could be wrapped up in a murder, we suspect that Hartman is going to confess all the details of the encrypted messages and his secret source being Cunningham, etc., especially when we tell him we can read all the enciphered messages. The Hamoud house that burned down is... Then we were trying to search for a little more details. We did notice that it is right across the street from the Pearl Street laundromat, which we couldn't really figure out. We know there was a receipt for that in Cunningham's house. I thought it was going to be for cleaning a smoke jacket. The jacket did appear to be cleaned, but when we went to the laundromat, we didn't get anywhere. So we're just pointing this out to Wiggins. Maybe you can see something we can't see. Advised police to search Cunningham house for evidence of a hammer. This was after the fact. I realized the police do think that the hammer broke the glass from outside. So I'm thinking maybe you could find a hammer in his house that we didn't look for that has a fragments of glass on them. Okay. We did read and almost overlooked at some point that the police have witnesses to the fire. I was suggesting maybe you could line up Cunningham with those witnesses, see if they recognize him. And then Wiggins suggested that maybe we might have difficulty catching Jimmy. So we proposed this technique to capture Jimmy. We know that Cunningham likes to hear himself talk, fancies himself a mastermind, and is very emotional over Mrs. Want. So he may confess once caught and pressured. So once the cops get him, we think he may confess. But if he does run, we're highly confident he can be lured to a spot for capture by having Mrs. Want contact him saying she has reconsidered and wants to talk. We think he's really in love with her and obsessed and paranoid and flustered. So we said he's not going to be able to pass that up. He may, in fact, be working around her house. Okay, we wonder if the Pearl Street laundromat receipt is of any evidentiary import, though maybe he would have brought smoke-filled coat for cleaning, could not confirm. Maybe police can think of something. And then we're giving Wiggins a warning about Duddy Brooks, who's threatened us. Betty Brooks may be a wild card in the final days. Trust that Wiggins can talk his way out of it, coming back to bite us. We're sort of pushing this all off on Wiggins, saying, we could get in trouble with the police for breaking into this guy's house. Though 1920s, I think they're a little more lax about that kind of stuff. But we're just warning them about that. And I think that guy doesn't want to get arrested. It's going to be hard for him. He's the actual guy who broke in. I think he's all bluster, and he's not going to actually try to get us in trouble. More evidence about Jimmy Cunningham's obsession with Mrs. Lant can be found in the false wall in the second desk drawer photograph of Mrs. Lant with Mr. Lant cut away. Trust Wiggins can leak this info to police if needed in a way that won't arouse suspicion. In other words, we found this evidence that he's obsessed with her, but maybe we don't want to admit how we know it, but we think Wiggins can figure out a way to do it. Okay, so that was our solution. I can't think of too much else I want to add. Did anyone think of anything after that wasn't in our official thing? That's what Matt got as our reply, and then this is going to be our final letter. Okay, let's see what else we've got in the chat. Debbie says, I've read. Anna has written 2 cases and is working on a 3rd for New York Noir that I'm going to write a tutorial. I'm going to film a tutorial in the next couple of days. So we're going to get Anna's cases formatted for New York Noir and play them on the channel soon. Let's see. Melissa says, interested, played many of 50 questions. Can't be much more dark than that game was. I think you have the right crowd for it. Okay. I wouldn't say Jimmy is in love with Michelle Lant. I would say he has a serious psychological issues, and one of them is his obsession about the woman. All right, well, maybe love sounds, he's infatuated with her. He wants her. He's willing to kill and frame and double-cross his friends to get her. So he is obsessed with her. Let's put it that way. All right. So let us open our reply here and see what we've got. This is exciting. Now, does everyone, we should say before we read this, there was some real discussion on the Discord about some disagreement. And I think that some of the people who've played it think there's some financial crime going on, that other people are involved, that there must be a reason that Hamoud got killed that we missed. And I guess I was unconvinced. To me, it feels like this is much more of a realistic thing. We thought there was a financial crime at the heart of this, but there wasn't really. There's a little bit of insider trading going on, but it's really low-level stuff. It's more the everyday stuff where you get a high-level investment banker getting information from his sources and passing it along. It may be walking on the border, but for me, this seemed a fairly straightforward case. Oldest story in the book, a crime of passion, an obsessed guy not stopping at anything to get this woman. But some people think that we've missed a big part of it involving financial crimes, that other people were involved, that there must be a reason why Hamoud was killed, that maybe the hand signals were involved somehow. I think I love the idea that he didn't mean to kill actual Hamoud and his wife, or he didn't care, because to me, that's like what happens with arson sometimes. People burn down a property for money or for whatever reason, revenge, and sometimes people get killed in the building fire and they didn't intend to kill them, but it's too late, they can't go back. And that to me feels like real life. So, okay, this is exciting. Anna says, let's see, any other further comments? Good reply. I have the idea that Jimmy picked Hamoud to kill because he was a sore loser and Hamoud always beat him at hearts. Okay, so part of the places we differ here is why Hamoud. And we asked ourselves that. Why Hamoud? I think we've got a couple of good theories. One is he started to figure out that Cunningham was lying about him and Lant, and he was going to talk to Lant, and they were going to figure out. I mean, if he talked to Lant, Cunningham's dead, right? If he goes to Lant and he says, hey, Cunningham says this is happening and this, he told you this, he's obviously manipulating us all, then Cunningham loses everything, loses Mrs. Lant. So that would be reason enough to kill him. So that's one possibility. Or accidental, or Anna says he just had to kill someone to frame Lant. Might as well be Hamoud. And Anna says he's so paranoid and twisted, maybe he just didn't like losing the game to Hamoud. Interesting. Okay, here we go. Bill Wiggins, 100 LaSalle Street, apartment 2E. Dear Mr. Reichler, it was a nail-biter, but we did it. Michael Lant has finally been released, and Jimmy Cunningham is in custody. In the final weeks, you were determined to find a reason Hamoud was targeted, and I was caught up in it alongside you, but the outcome has reminded me sometimes terrible things happen to decent people without rhyme or reason. Without the evidence to support such assumptions, you rightfully concluded that Cunningham not only acted alone, but murdered Mr. and Mrs. Hamoud for his own selfish interests. A person as tuned into the stock market as Cunningham could have simply kept his knowledge to himself, but involved Lant's colleagues to fuel his paranoia and strain his marriage. As we learned, Cunningham ascertained a way to profit off the recent crash without repercussion. His motives were envy and lust. Much like Michael Lant, we were prone to believe that misfortune can be blamed on organized, calculated, powerful interests. Without evidence, these assumptions can drive one toward paranoia and isolation, as they did to Michael Lant. It is fortunate that we got the evidence needed to uncover the truth and didn't let our inclinations to uncover broader financial motives get in the way of this. It was truly an exciting end to a case that began as a strange, petty grievance. I rounded up all of the info you provided to me and brought it to Detective Cohen's office. We would need the support of the police to secure our evidence, so it was important that I convinced Cohen of Lant's innocence. I detailed the key arguments in Cunningham's guilt. Cunningham's lustful motive, which Mrs. Lant can confirm, Cunningham's access to Lant's home and the card game, giving him an opportunity to collect and plant evidence. The testimony of the hardware store owner who believed he could identify Cunningham in a lineup. Cunningham's efforts directing the authorities towards Lant, which Cohen can confirm personally. The fabricated Lant-Hamoud feud. We believe if several witnesses at the stock exchange are questioned, it will have no substance. Cunningham's duplicitous role, playing both sides of the Lant-Hamoud feud, evident from decrypted messages found in Hamoud's office, pointing to Cunningham as Hartman's source. We believe a search of Cunningham's home would uncover incriminating evidence, such as the hammer used to break the Hamoud's window. Lots of people own hammers, Cohen rebutted. There's a lot here, and it's certainly worth looking into, but what's Lant's alibi? How do I justify letting him go? I thought for a moment, but pleaded with Cohen. We weren't able to identify an alibi for Lant, but the evidence against Cunningham will exonerate him. I doubt Cunningham will have a verifiable alibi. He gave me his alibi, Cohen said. He claims to have gone straight home after the card game, but wouldn't have seen anyone as he lives alone. Difficult to verify, like you said. Didn't he come to you before the arson even happened? I asked. I think you've got your dates mixed up, Wiggins. If you recall, I stopped by your home a couple of days after the fire, but before it went public. I was conducting an investigation into Lant after Cunningham tipped me off. We had a strong case, including several witnesses to Lant's outward resentment toward Hamoud at the card game that night. I spoke to them all to verify his extreme obsession with Hamoud, which we confirmed through interviews, and going so far as to steal and collect Hamoud's transaction information, which we recovered in Lant's office. What you're saying makes sense, but I'm in a tough spot here, Wiggins. Help me out. You've met with Cunningham and spoken to him frequently, haven't you, Detective? I'm guessing he bragged about all his connections and about how he was worried about Lant all along. Was he ever apologetic about the Hamoods, about how he couldn't save them? Did he ever talk about how sad and betrayed he felt that his friend would do this? How did he seem to you, Detective? Excited. Cohen lit himself a cigarette. Okay, Wiggins, I'll entertain your theory, but without an alibi, Want stays in lockup. From then on, the dominoes fell. The police raided Cunningham's apartment. Unfortunately, as suspected, he was tipped off by the Duddy Brooks situation and removed a few key pieces of evidence. Police didn't recover his notes on his colleagues, a hammer, or the trench coat and hat. When I tactfully suggested they search for a hidden compartment in his desk, they found the one thing Cunningham would never part with, and it was enough to raise Cohen's eyebrows. Cohen interviewed Mrs. Want, and she confirmed the story she shared with Jackie. She was back at her home with her daughter at this point, and I had Roger Vernon around to keep an eye on her. Alice and I also stopped by. Cohen explained that after the raid, Cunningham hadn't shown up at his office or home in a couple days, and they needed Mrs. Want's help to locate him. I understand he mailed you a note yesterday, Mrs. Want, Cohen said. Thank you for bringing this to our attention right away. This is a hard ask, but we're going to need your help luring him out. We need you to go to the location he gave you. Hasn't this gone on long enough? She asked. Surely you have enough evidence to release my husband. I'm afraid we still need our witness to identify Jimmy in a lineup as the person who purchased key evidence. Until then, we don't quite have enough. I'll do it, Alice exclaimed. Just get me a wig, some sunglasses, and a cigarette. Mrs. Want smokes, so it has to look real. I obviously shot down the Alice idea immediately, but while we were arguing, something about Alice's determination inspired Mrs. Want. She's agreed to help if it would free her husband. I wasn't there, but Roger was. Mrs. Want stood right in the middle of Penn Station. As Cunningham approached her, half a dozen police officers in plain clothes pounced on him. He had to know it was most likely a trap, but the heart wants what it wants. Once he realized what was happening, he went into a fit of rage. Roger had to jump on him to help restrain him while they got the cuffs on. The case has gotten a lot of media attention. I'm no Sherlock Holmes, but I think the Journal did an interesting job summarizing the whole thing now that the police have pieced it all together. I included a copy in case you missed it. I've also enclosed a letter from our client and a draft of Cohen's case report shared for your review. It was a pleasure working with you again, old friend. I knew your team was right for this one. You spared no expense, literally, going above and beyond in what Want originally asked us to do. I'm thankful that justice prevailed. Sincerely, Wiggins. Well, this is very realistic. Like the places we messed up, the cop complained about. So we were a little thin on some stuff like the alibi and hiring the burglar to break in. Gave him a chance to get rid of evidence, but in the end, it all worked out. This is an amazing little final scene. Love it. Love Alice's involvement. Can't ask for more than that. All right, so here's a little police report. Let's see, we got a police report. Let's start with that. And then he did, let's read the police report. And then we've got a newspaper and a letter from Michael Lott. Okay, so here we have a fairly long police report here. Alice is the best, says Anna. Debbie says Alice steals the show every time. She does. Alice has like one line in this and she stole the show. All right, here we go. Let's read the police report. Case report, Hamoud arson, confidential, suspect James Cunningham, detective Alexis Cohen, November 14, 1929. Marisa and Eva Hamoud were killed in their home on 160 Front Street by a fire started intentionally by James Cunningham. The suspect was primarily motivated to frame Michael Lott and win the approval of Lott's wife, Michelle. The suspect went to great lengths to pursue Mrs. Lant and likely considered the deaths of Maurice and Eva Hamoud acceptable collateral damage to achieve his ends. The suspect denies all charges but displays narcissistic and sociopathic personality traits consistent with a willingness to commit murder. Below is a chronological timeline of events leading up to the murders and evidence supporting the conviction of James Cunningham. At some point prior to 1928, James Cunningham was invited to the Lant's home for dinner. He became infatuated with Mrs. Lant and starting in 1928, pursued Michelle Lant romantically and assertively. He found various ways to keep her husband occupied as he did this. Ultimately, his sexual advances were rejected, but Cunningham was unable to accept this outcome. His schemes to fracture the Lant's marriage became more elaborate over time. He was able to earn Michael Lant's trust, and obtain access to his home and office. Eventually, the opportunistic Cunningham ascertained that Lant failed to make a payment to Maurice Hamoud. He played both sides, telling both Lant and Hamoud that the other was spreading rumors about them, which damaged Lant's reputation among his colleagues. Cunningham viewed his professional and personal relationships as transactional, keeping detailed notes on the best ways to manipulate and exploit his colleagues. He used this as a means to grow his network at the bank over the years, but was looking for ways to further alienate Michael Lant as a means to Mrs. Lant. Cunningham maintained a close professional relationship with Sawyer Hartman, a well-connected executive at Morgan Bank. Cunningham believed he could fuel Lant's paranoia and obsessive work ethic through Mason Carrier's card game, attended by Lant, Hartman, and Hamoud. He began supplying some of his intelligence to Hartman in early 1929. Cunningham also befriended Mason Carrier, the eccentric organizer of the card game and an important manager at the Wall Street Stock Exchange. He steered Carrier toward specific punishments for losing the card game that would help place Sawyer Hartman in positions to gain insider information, such as close proximity to telephone operator Margaret Layton. While Cunningham could have directly shared his intelligence with Hartman, he knew convincing Hartman to intentionally lose the card game to Maurice Hamoud would attract Michael Lant's attention. He went as far as to develop a system of encoded messages to be used by Hartman in the card game. Whichever 3 cards were first passed to Hartman's clients were later used as keys in the cipher written to them after the game. Well, this was one, you'll remember, in our reply. This was one of my theories here. It's also possible that the passing of cards in the game was part of passing encryption keys for the messages. Okay, so that sounds like it turned out to be true, or at least the cops think so. Whichever 3 cards were first passed were later used as the keys in the cipher written to them after the game. Hartman played along, grateful for the insider information. Ultimately, these events led to Sawyer Hartman learning about overpriced stocks at AT&T and New York Central Railroad and supplying this information to premier clients such as Maurice Hamoud and Dean Kimmel. Cunningham's plan was mostly successful. He watched Lant slowly lose himself to paranoia and conspiracy while whispering in his ear to not give up. He took every opportunity he could to isolate Lant from his family and promote the idea that Lant hated Hamoud, supplying a rotating list of guests to the card game who would witness Lant's unmistakable ire toward Hamoud. Cunningham's plan culminated in committing a horrifying act against Maurice Hamoud and pinning the blame on Michael Lant. He couldn't simply dispose of Lant directly. He needed Michelle Lant to view her husband as a villain and substitute himself as a shoulder to cry on. Makes sense. Cunningham broke the Hamoud's window, placed gas canisters in their home. He lit a fuse using a rope purchased from a hardware store and planted several pieces of evidence to frame Lant. He used his access to Lant's home to borrow a pair of shoes and press them into the earth while clearing away his own footprints. We figured that out. He also left a playing card with Lant's fingerprints, easy enough to obtain during the card game. Hamoud earned a reputation from his winning streak as the King of Hearts. He also ensured that Lant would be preoccupied and alone that evening and observed the light in his office to confirm as much. That was our theory as well. Regretfully, Cunningham even used the New York Homicide Office to his advantage. He visited my office the day after the arson and explained his concern about Want to me. So I got that date wrong. I thought he had been feeding that information before the fire, but it seems like we got that wrong. But luckily, it didn't kill us. He said Want confided in him that he was investigating Maurice Hamoud for damaging intelligence and even hired a private investigator named Bill Wiggins to assist. That's what got the cops visiting Wiggins. Cunningham's knowledge of both our investigation and the private investigators helped him stay one step ahead, but several important incidents thwarted his scheme. While staking out the Want home to obtain a pair of shoes, he was discovered by a young investigator named Alice Wiggins. He noticed her before he was going to walk to his own front door and instead led her across the city, slipping away by turning a corner and bolting into the front door of Irving Trust Bank. Maybe we should have figured that. He was later surprised. He was surprised and thrown off to later see Alice at his front door. Fearing she would recognize him or notice his trench coat, he attempted to deduce whether anyone knew of her whereabouts, but she, of course, told her father where she was going. Oh boy, thank God. Cunningham was satisfied that she was unaware of anything and escorted her out, but a chance encounter with Michelle Lant on her way to visit Cunningham and a key observation that Cunningham was wearing cologne gave investigators the breakthrough needed to identify a motive. That was the breakthrough we had. That was wonderful. In the final days of the investigation, Cunningham became distraught. His advances were once again rejected by Mrs. Lant. He became violent and desperate, but Mrs. Lant was fortunately intercepted in time and brought to a safe location. Our office received conflicting reports of the involvement of Pearl Street Laundromat. It's our conclusion that Cunningham most likely cleaned his jacket at the laundromat to remove the smell of smoke and bribed the owner to inform him of any inquiries into it. The laundromat's owner asked for legal representation when questioned. Okay, that's pretty cool. That's interesting. All right, well, that solves that mystery. Perhaps by coincidence, Cunningham's home was burgled. He suspected he was caught and destroyed as much evidence as he could. So that sort of backfired on us. He then attempted to flee the city. Before he did, he had to try one last time to win his ultimate prize and asked Mrs. Lant to meet him at Penn Station. She met him, accompanied by New York's finest. It's unknown to this office what other horrible manipulative acts Cunningham has committed against his enemies over the years, but a remorseless predator has been removed from society. Okay, pretty good. All right, let's take a look at the Wall Street Journal for November 12th. November 12th, 1929. Market devastation continues. Millions of shares. I know, there's one more page. I thought we would read the paper before the final letter from... Oh, there's one more page from there's another backside to the police report. Sorry. The following evidence supports the case against James Cunningham. Thank you. Michelle Lant's testimony to her relationship with Cunningham, testimonies of Sawyer Hartman, Dean Kimmel, and Margaret Leighton. Hartman identified Cunningham as his source when threatened with accessory charges. This is how we thought it would turn out if you pressed them a bit. Positive identification of James Cunningham by a hardware store owner who witnessed him purchase the flammable rope. That chasing down that lead and making that suggestion paid off. Maurice Hamoud's personal records provided by son Victor, including decoded messages between Sawyer Hartman and Maurice Hamoud. Several employees of Irving Trust Bank, when questioned, were first informed of Lant and Hamoud's feud by James Cunningham or direct colleagues of Cunningham. We suggested that when you search this out, you'll see that he was planting evidence of this feud. A photograph of Michael Lant discovered in Cunningham's home. Cunningham's possession of a key to the Lant home. Due to the sensitive nature of New York Homicide's involvement in this case, this report will remain confidential. So affirmed Detective Alexis Cohen, NYPD Homicide. Okay, pretty great. All right, so then we've got a letter from Lant himself, but I thought we'd take a little diversion first and check out the newspaper here. Millions of shares erased daily. Guest article by GP Thomas. Devastating collapse of the stock market shows no signs of abating as panic continues to grip Wall Street. Millions of shares are being traded and erased in frantic selling, with losses mounting by the hour. Nation's financial capital, once brimming with confidence, now finds itself mired in uncertainty as brokers and investors alike scramble to assess the depth of the ongoing crisis. Yesterday's trading saw another staggering decline. This is not a correction. This is a calamity, remarked one stockbroker as he exited the floor of the New York Stock Exchange late Monday afternoon. Investors are losing faith faster than we can tally the losses. Yikes. Even those who clung to optimism following the catastrophic events of Black Tuesday just a few weeks ago are now reeling. The collapse has reached far beyond Wall Street, spreading fear to banks, businesses, and households across the country. In an effort to calm nerves, a consortium of bankers led by J.P. Morgan and Company has made visible efforts to stabilize the market. However, their interventions have failed to quell the unprecedented wave of sell-offs as the market seems impervious to confidence-boosting measures. Yikes. I mean, people were killing themselves from this crash. The broader economic implications of this disaster remain unclear. Concerns are mounting about a possible contraction of business activity, factories slowing production. As dust settles on another harrowing day on Wall Street, the nation waits with bated breath. Will the market find a bottom, or is this merely the beginning of a deeper, more profound unraveling of the economic fabric that has defined the decade? Yikes. Okay, but here's an article about our case. Framed arsonist exonerated, true culprit apprehended. Michael Lant, now reunited with his family, is feeling grateful to those who believed in and fought for his innocence. Lant was arrested for first-degree murder of Maurice and Eva Hammoud, but is now exonerated. The true arsonist, James Cunningham, deployed an elaborate scheme to pit Lant and Hammoud against each other while quietly sabotaging Lant's reputation. The scheme culminated in murdering Lant's most public adversary. Cunningham's motives are not fully disclosed, but is believed to have acted out of jealousy. Cunningham's lawyer refused to acknowledge the charges and claimed that accusations against him are fake communist propaganda. Irving Trust Bank, Lant's employer, issued a statement of support and offered him back his position as a stockbroker effective immediately, even while a dark cloud currently hangs over Wall Street. Detective Alexis Cohen of the NYPD Homicide also issued a statement. Cunningham's scheme was clever, but that's why we're thorough. The final pieces proved Lant's innocence, and we quickly apprehended the culprit. Murder and arson will never be tolerated in our city, and attempts to manipulate our detectives away from the truth will never succeed. And we've got another article here about Shelter's wealthiest insiders from market damage. Robert Babson's provocative claim at the National Business Conference in September the market would not only slow down but reverse to unimaginable lows. Babson's predictions remain controversial, now finds agreeable company with rumored views of famed economist Irving Fisher. According to sources of the journal, Babson and Fisher, who normally find themselves at opposite ends of the political spectrum, may take comfort in company. Something wrong happened. What went wrong? That's from the last newspaper? What do you mean that's from the last newspaper? Oh, you mean the two-tiered system article? Hmm. That article is from the first. I didn't see it in the second. I don't know what could be wrong. Well, let me show you what I have as the total newspaper, and you tell me. There's the two-tiered system. Then there's Buster Keaton hides in plain sight. Then on the other page, That article continues. NYPD relies on unpaid interns, angry mob, small business weathers, prohibition largely ignored. Looks like the wrong text was pasted into the two-tiered system article. Okay, then that, I see. Okay, well, it doesn't matter, right? This is just for flavor. Right? No big deal, just for flavor. Okay, so that article text is wrong, but everything else is okay. All right, so we're okay. We'll just skip reading the rest of that. Here we have an article about our Buster Keaton impersonator that we never used. Buster Keaton, beloved actor known for his incredible cinematic stunts and off-camera his love of elaborate pranks, has been in high demand, so much so that a man by the name of Tobias Pabst, who was one of the people we could hire, has been offering his services as a Buster Keaton impersonator. Pabst, for $1, would attend your party and use his uncanny resemblance to pretend to be Buster Keaton and socialize with your guests. However, clients in awe of Pabst's incredible impersonation now wonder if Pabst is not in fact Buster Keaton himself. Doing a little prank. The ruse first showed its cracks at a retirement party for Police Chief Milford Lynch. Private investigator Jackie Hardboil, in attendance, made the connection. That's one of our guys. This Keaton's a clever guy, Hardboil said when reached for comment. I won't tell you how he grabbed that car and flew into the air, but ever since I took my little girl to see that movie, I've been on a Keaton like a mouse on a steamboat. Hollywood magic and lights are a long way away from here, and this time the jig is up. Hardboil provided the Journal with a detailed packet of evidence backing up his claim. Keaton goes on holiday whenever Pabst makes himself available and happens to be on the lease for Pabst's apartment. My little girl may like peanut butter and jelly, but don't cut the corners off and expect to call it a sandwich. Spokesperson for Buster Keaton denied the prank. The insinuation is an insult to Tobias Pabst, the greatest impersonator of our generation. Pabst, the small-town farmer, has mastered the appearance, mannerisms, and talent of Buster Keaton to such an extraordinary extent that his own identity is now in question. Buster Keaton tips his hat to this significant accomplishment. Those unaware of the unique opportunity lament missing their chance to potentially meet Buster Keaton. We spoke with patrons, leaving a showing of Keaton's spite marriage. How interesting that would have been, one woman told the Journal. Imagine writing letters to the actual Buster Keaton, asking him to attend your events. I really feel like I missed out. But I'm also not sure exactly what I would hire him for. That's where that mirrors our situation. We have a little ad here. American Appraisal Company, consultants in property economics. NYPD relies on unpaid interns to sort evidence. An investigation by the Journal has uncovered that the NYPD too often relies on unpaid, inexperienced assistants. Journalists have observed strange protocols at crime scenes, such as makeshift evidence proxies and handwritten notes. Our ongoing investigation has uncovered that interns hired by NYPD, unversed in proper evidence protocols, were utilized in marking crime scenes, leading to confusion and chaos in several instances. In one such instance, an intern removed evidence from a crime scene and recreated his own mock-up as a stand-in. NYPD would not comment on the highly unusual practice, but assured the Journal that its staff is committed to best practices in forensics and all staff members are trained in proper forensics protocols. The Journal has not verified this claim. Okay, this is a little story about my comment that there was some confusion about a replacement proxy King of Hearts card, and the channel was arguing with me about that, what that meant, and I was saying, it was clear what it was saying, but that can't possibly be real police policy to do that. You'd put a numbered evidence marker. You wouldn't have a pack of cards and find a copy of the cards anyway. So this is a little inside joke. Angry mob descends upon New York Times. An error in Sunday's New York Times crossword puzzle led to an uproar on Monday. The Times has acknowledged that an intern mistakenly shifted the numbering of all clues by one, leading to mass confusion. The Times attempted to rectify the situation by hastily releasing a special edition puzzle shortly after. But continuity errors in this bonus puzzle led to further confusion. The response did not satisfy a large crowd of puzzle enthusiasts who descended upon the Times office in protest. What was meant to be a 10-minute protest, according to city permits, refused to disperse and lasted several hours longer than intended. NYPD eventually clashed with the mob and a brawl broke out, but no arrests were made. Ultimately, all involved shook hands and apologized to one another, agreeing to look forward to next week's puzzle and cut the author some slack. Okay. So, you know what this is. This is about the cipher. It's pretty funny. It's really funny. This is all a little inside joke about how the cipher shifts were off by one and how it created an uproar in the channel when we were trying to solve it. Okay. All right. That's amazing. Okay. Small business weathers market uncertainty. Harrington Whitcomb Carriage Company. That's from our Sherlock Holmes case a year ago. In fact, I still have. Where is it? Here was our share from 1889 of the Harrington Whitcomb Carriage Company from our previous case working for Sherlock Holmes. And Wiggins asked us if we wanted to sell it before the market crashed. We decided to hold on to it. Let's see what this article says. Harrington Whitcomb Carriage Company was one of several Manhattan businesses unaffected by the ongoing economic turmoil. A small cab company founded in 1891 in London, HWC opened a second depot in Manhattan in 1920. Known for their chatty drivers, HWC cabs are a staple of Yorkville and the surrounding area. It's just one of many businesses weathering the storm. In HWC's case, their business model is what helps them endure. We spoke to Daniel Harrington, manager of the Manhattan Depot. People still need to get where they're going, and our fares are modest. We've been doing this for 40 years, and we're still small enough that our stocks never blew up like the big ones. Slow and steady wins the race. All right, that's excellent. Prohibition largely ignored by New Yorkers. A strange phenomenon has occurred in recent months throughout Manhattan. Despite federal laws prohibiting the consumption of alcohol, the speakeasies, which quietly supplied willing Americans with their forbidden fix, have bubbled up into everyday life. Cultural shift is unusual, but has become so prominent that New Yorkers may mistakenly believe the days of prohibition are over. It's like we all just forgot. One man who would not be identified told us, one week you're walking into a tavern talking to a bartender and you ask for a tall one, and then suddenly you remember and you have to correct yourself. He was going to pour me one if I didn't stop him. Did we forget what year it is? Nobody seems to care. The Wall Street Journal reminds readers that possession of alcohol is illegal per the United States Constitution. Healthy, refreshing, stress-reducing alternatives such as tobacco remain available. Okay, so a little this might be a little explanation of why our drunk cop is still drinking even though we're in prohibition times. All right, well, that was amazing. All right, so here's our last piece here. It's a letter from our original client from 6 weeks ago, Michael Lott. Dear Mr. Reichler, I wanted to write to you personally and thank you for your role in bringing this horror to an end. There's still a lot to process. I've spoken with your team, the police, and my wife, and I feel like a fool. I have a lot of regrets, but the biggest is not being there for Michelle. I know in my heart she loves me. Jimmy manipulated us both to take advantage of her. I have to believe we'll make it through this. I needed some closure, so I went to the financial district precinct a couple days ago and asked to speak with Jimmy Cunningham. It was surreal being on the other side of the table, but they brought Jimmy Cunningham out in pinstripes and sat him across from me. I'm not here to gloat, Jimmy, I said. I just need to understand why you did all this. Was it all worth killing two people and destroying my life and marriage? I thought we were friends. I don't know what a friend is, Michael. Your friends all want something from you. Some people want to be liked. Some people want money. Some people want to talk about baseball games. Once you figure out what they want, they'll give you what you want. Not that this ever interested you. You're here because you don't know what you want. I'm here because it seems Michelle doesn't know what she wants either. She'll figure it out, though. She'll realize what she could have had, and I'll be there when she does. Goodbye, Michael. I got the hell out of there and went home to my family. He's a sick man, and I look forward to putting him and his poison behind us. I had a chance to meet Victor Hamoud yesterday, and I learned a lot about my supposed rival. Such a shame that we were pitted against each other. I was also able to reconnect with Dean Kimmel, who was questioned by the police about our feud, and realized that all of us were being used. Instead of returning his AT&T shares, he ended up purchasing them and gave a few of them to me as an apology for everything that's happened between us. It's not much, but I want you to have one. I should be paying you more for everything you did, but I also lost a lot in the recent weeks. Good news is, I've been rehired by Irving Trust Bank. Thank you again for all you've done. Sincerely, Michael Wan. Then the last piece here is a share that he sent us in American Telephone and Telegraph Company, AT&T. $100. Or $100 worth of, I don't really know how to read these. What have we got? We've got a little certificate here. 10-year convertible, 4.5% gold debenture bond. Due July 1st, 1959. I think that says 1939. Issue limited to $225 million. So they sold $225 million worth of bonds. And this is a $100 bond. And I don't know what all this is, but this looks pretty beautiful. It's printed out on a nice one in stock. And I'm not sure what all of these are. Period for conversion of bonds into stocks. Call for redemption, surrender of bonds for conversion into stock, bonds. Yeah, I don't really know. I mean, bonds, you're basically loaning the company some money to be paid back at a certain interest rate, and that's what these are. 10-year convertible bond. So I guess you buy it 10 years later, it should be paid back with 4.5% interest. So I guess we would expect to get $104 back, a little bit more at the end of 10 years, but we could also convert it into stock. I'm not sure how these work. And then I really have no idea what this is about. Look, there's my name. So he signed it over to me. November 14, 1929. a different way to look at the bond, 10-year convertible bond. So it's a bond, $100, meaning someone paid $100. In 10 years, they're going to get it back. They'll be paid back the original 100 plus 4.5% interest. I believe that's how it works. And it's a special bond that can be converted into stock, would be the idea. So there's a rule for converting it into stock. Looks like there are some instructions here. Funds of various amount. Well, we'll learn a little bit how stocks and bonds worked in 1929. Maybe at some point here it says about the conversion into stock. So you've got a certain period. You can convert it into stock. All unmatured coupons, that's what these are. These are the interest coupons, and they're dated for each month. Okay, there we go. So this is how this would work. I mean, in 2025, when you buy bonds, it's all electronic and you get your interest payments deposited right into your investment account. But here you'd have to send this coupon in to get your interest, and it looks like you're getting $2 in interest. So maybe I was underestimating what the percentage mean. I'm not quite sure how that percentage works. But here it is. Each month you would send this coupon in to get your monthly interest on your bond. All right. Well, that's pretty wonderful. This will go up on the wall next to our Harrington Whitcomb Carriage Company stock. Boy, we would be rich if we could somehow hold on to these. That's pretty beautiful, though. All right. Well, I don't think you could ask for much better of a finale letter than that. Let's take a little break here for 5 minutes, and then we'll come back. We'll read Matt's afterward and talk about our experience with the case. I'll see you in 5 minutes. All right, we're back, and we're going to read now a couple of pages that Matt, the author of the case we've been playing for the last 6 weeks, wrote to talk a little bit about the process and his little afterword. Here we go. Hello, sleuths. Matt here from the future. It was a joy to write another mystery for you all this year. Jesse asked me to keep notes throughout the process, so I wanted to share some thoughts about how the case developed and lessons learned. This was a very challenging case to write at times. I was in a writer's block rut for most of 2024, trying to write a case for High and Low. I was overwhelmed by all the directories, maps, and the unfamiliar setting and genre. Noir and historic fiction are not comfortable genres for me. I think that's a bit surprising to hear, given how noir this case felt. Anyway, but I also realized that the weekly enjoyment and collaboration of the improv case inspires me a lot more to keep it moving. The breakthrough happened when I let go of it having to be noir and thought about what I'd be excited to write about. I landed on card games. It felt fitting for our gaming community, and I'm a big fan of card games like poker, oh hell, and hearts. Finance also interests me, and I knew the setting of Wall Street would give me an entry point into the world. I also decided to make it a loose sequel to our previous mystery. It helped me dip my toe into noir to have a familiar face writing the intro letters. Last year's case started with a personal conflict and expanded into a large conspiracy. This time I wanted to do the opposite and create the red herring of a criminal conspiracy that would ultimately converge on a personal story. Setting the case in 1929 would make it obvious from future knowledge that a market crash was coming, so this couldn't be the core of the mystery. Here's what I knew going into the case. Michael Lant was a nosy, work-obsessed guy. His friend Jimmy was betraying him and trying to steal his wife and manipulating the situation to his advantage. So that was right from the start the plan. And Sawyer Hartman was passing his clients coded messages. Interesting. Okay, so that was all known from the start. I thought maybe like we had figured something out early about anyway. I created a new mechanic for this mystery, forcing you to pay for your leads, and suggested that conserving for when you had more information would be helpful. The reason for this was to push back on the long lists of leads from last year's case. Unfortunately, money was not a deterrent, and there were still 4 to 6 leads being requested per week. The letters ended up being very long and difficult to fit into the Sunday afternoon time slot, and there wasn't a lot of time each week for group discussion. As much as I wanted to keep the rules thematic, I realized I needed to be more direct about restricting leads in the future. Each investigator was designed to have strengths and weaknesses. Roger Vernon was not meant to be a generalist, but instead more of the muscle, but I rolled with it and was glad you ended up giving him so many of your leads and teaching him to be more tactful. Jackie Hardwell Hardboiled is, of course, meant to be a parody of Noir based on Leslie Nielsen's Naked Gun protagonist, and Whose Line Is It Anyway? Film noir sketches. Then, of course, there's Alice. She was designed to be a freebie strong lead you could use once per week. I had a lot of fun writing Alice. Perhaps you haven't seen the last of her. Letters 2 through 4 were definitely the most exciting to write, and I'm realizing it was because I was on vacation those 2 weeks, had a lot more space for creative energy. The first letter was rushed, and I figured a few things out right away. Jesse pointed out that the purpose of bringing the case forward was trivial, and that there wasn't a practical reason to code messages in a card game. I agreed, so I had to invent a more personal reason for it in letter 2. That's when I created the Lot-Hamoud feud, and other details fell into place, like Cunningham killing Hamoud to blame Lot. Interesting. I wish I had come up with the idea of Sawyer Hartman losing the card game on purpose to position him in the punishments, but I honestly didn't. It was such a good theory and better than what I had in mind that I had to build it into the mystery and roll with it, taking you all on a series of leads involving phone operators and AT&T. The leads chosen for letter 4 were so strong, sending Alice to Jimmy, that I had to basically give it to you. So much so that I was worried I made it too easy. You basically had it at that point, but knowing there was still a lot of loose ends involving the financial scheme, I challenged you all to use one more round of leads to gather more information. The case obviously hit a wall in letter 5. We've talked about why and the cipher failed so spectacularly, but if it had worked as intended, Jesse would have solved it immediately. The comment about using the web was a nudge to enter it all into a Wigner cipher decoder once you figured out what kind of cipher it was, but it was always meant to be solvable. Jesse's write-up on ciphers in narrative mysteries will be helpful for next time. So I wrote a little essay, several pages, about using ciphers in mystery games after that little experience. Duddy Brooks was designed to be a sort of mini game to earn more money along the way, but since he was only used at the end, and since you wouldn't let him steal anything, I decided to make him into a villain and give you all a challenging moral decision. The time limit was inspired by a moment I really enjoyed in The Wrong Book. That's my case for New York Noir. The laundromat lead wasn't implemented well. It was clear that I misremembered how the receipt was found and thought it was on the jacket. It got me questioning the whole thing and thinking, why would someone as smart as Jimmy leave such an obvious evidence? The most realistic conclusion was that he planted it, but this was a disappointing outcome I regret, a missed opportunity to just yes and the choice and give you more details. Toward the end of the case, there was a sense of something important being missed that led to some frustration. You weren't really missing that much. There was an assumption that there had to be a specific reason Hamoud needed to be killed. But ultimately, Jimmy was an opportunist. Wiggin was there to mirror your thoughts and theories, not really lead you in a certain direction. But I can see how it might have created positive feedback loop to see him also struggle with this aspect. I also included newspapers as a thematic way for events to unfold. This was one of the original visions of High and Low, so I wanted to include it here. There was a lot of deleted content. I wrote newspaper articles over the last few weeks as ideas came up, including one with wall-to-wall dad jokes about the web that was cut for space. One character I'm disappointed you never got to meet is Mason Carrier. Perhaps you'll notice the initials MC. Mason Carrier, the game master, is loosely based on me. If you had met him, you would have discovered that he was not masterminding anything. He just really loves organizing and playing games with his spreadsheets and systems. If you have any other questions about what went into making this case or what changed, feel free to reach out directly. Matt. All right, so let's talk a little bit about this 6-week experience. Let's hear from the chat. Debbie says, I loved Jackie Hardboil as well. Debbie says it was a great case, really fun to help edit. The stock market and bonds part was a bit hard for me to grasp. All that talk about borrowing and stuff confused me, mostly because I thought it was an integral part of the murder. Anna says it was well written and entertaining. Alice and Jackie always cracked me up. This was a well thought out mystery, Matt, even though I personally felt Jimmy's motive for killing the Hamouds was shaky. Okay, let me talk a little bit about the experience and the one game design issue that I'm not sure I know how to put into words, but I think we should talk a little bit about. Debbie says, one thing we struggled a bit with, especially at the start, was there was a lot of characters introduced at once. Mason Carrier kind of got lost because of that. And it says the finale was great. Pretty amazing documents. What a newspaper. It was a special experience. Matt says, the author says, thanks everyone. I can see how the motive was shaky. There was a little suspension of disbelief, and there were probably easier ways for Jimmy to accomplish his goals. Melissa says it was really good. Characters were well fleshed out. Lots of twists. Okay, so I'll come back to the chat in a second, but let me talk about the overall experience. It is interesting to hear Matt said that he wasn't that comfortable with the noir setting, because for me, really, when you look at this case in totality, it feels very noir. This idea that we've got this man obsessed with the wife, and that little ending scene when Michael Lott goes and talks to him was chilling. Reminds me a little of the movie High and Low, Akira Kurosawa movie. There is a scene where he goes and talks to the criminal, and it's sort of chilling. And to me, this felt very noirish. And the idea that the Hamouds get killed because, well, he's a sociopath, and he just wants to get they're just means to an end. To me, it felt really good. And the affair with Mrs. Lott and how it went a little bit. She did get involved with Jimmy Cunningham a little bit and then called it off. To me, it felt very noir. And I'm not talking about the Jackie Hardboiled dialogue, which was a good parody of noir. But I think that for me, the case really worked. And this was a phenomenal ending. This is what you want in an ending, sort of a wrap-up of the details, and then hitting these emotional notes of hearing from the client, hearing this actual heartfelt, emotional final letter from the client, grateful for what we've done. Very satisfying. We got the scene with the villain at the end. We got to capture the villain. Our advice and theories got worked into everything so that we felt like we did solve the case. And then the newspaper was just wonderful, a little bit of comic relief. And Matt knew to give us a little bit of Alice to make us happy that we got to interact with her once more. She had like one line, but stole the whole scene. Really an amazing ending. Could not have asked for more. And boy, am I grateful that Matt created this for us. Now, I want to talk about the pacing and the general structure. So you can see a couple people in the chat struggled a little bit with the financial elements of it, and that maybe the financial stuff was a big red herring. Like it was a big piece, the context and the setting, and yet wasn't involved in our crime. And as Matt talked about, that was his idea. That was his vision for this case. That this time I wanted to create the red herring of criminal conspiracy that would ultimately converge on a personal story. To me, that all worked. I love the idea that we're called into the case for one thing. I mean, there's something very beautiful about that. We're called into the case for this trivial matter of this card game. And we sort of have to work against the distractions of being lured away by the hand signals. And I love that we didn't get trapped into that. And then it morphed from a card game to financial crimes. And it was always sort of luring us with the possibility of financial crimes. And then we got that letter too, that opens with this arson and killing of one of our main characters. And I did not feel like we had too many characters to handle. But that little pacing where we went from a card game to financial crimes to all of a sudden murder, and a very intriguing murder where we got the feeling that our client was being set up. And that really opened up all sorts of possibilities and gave us much more serious investment in solving the case. That's a very clever, I don't know if you want to call it tried and true, but that's a formula that works. Start people off thinking they're solving a trivial crime, and then all of a sudden you realize you're in over your head and this is much more serious, was amazing. And then we went from that to a really great letter where we sent Alice to talk, where before we read the letter, I said, there's something missing from this, and I feel like it could be Jimmy Cunningham. And then we got this great scene that created a real aha moment for us. We had a couple of those moments, a couple of those light bulb moments. One was with the scene of the arson. It was actually, there was a really, really subtle, I love when there's this subtle clue that are easy to bypass. And in the letter about the arson, there was a really nice subtle clue about how there were footprints, and then the dirt around them was disturbed or mentioned, something like that. And we figured out, that sounds like someone has planted footprints and then covered up their own. And that was a very subtle thing that really, that's when we knew, okay, they're trying to frame our client. And then when we put those pieces together, there was this amazing set of letters where she talks to Cunningham. She hates his cologne. It was just a cute little thing. And then she runs into Mrs. Lant, who says she's visiting Cunningham. And we just read past that the first time, didn't think anything of it. The second time we read it, wait a second. Cunningham's wearing cologne because Mrs. Lant is going to meet with him, and it all clicked into place. That was a fantastic moment. So I don't think those things could have been done any better. Those were just the writing of Alice, the clues, everything was just perfect. The pacing was perfect. And then I think what happened was the next letter really threw us. And I think, I don't know exactly how to explain it. I think what happened was more of a pacing issue. Like the pacing was murder, and then we figured out our suspect, and we were so excited to figure out who it was and close the trap on him. And what happened, I think there were a couple of loose ends we couldn't figure out how to lock up, I think is what it was. Well, we got the cipher. That really threw us. But I think there were a couple of leads that we couldn't get footholds on. Whether it was the laundromat that we couldn't get the foothold on, or we couldn't find an alibi for Michael Lant that we thought we had to find. And then we broke into Cunningham's house and we couldn't find evidence against him. And I think it was sort of a feeling that, well, let's do it this way. It's always tough to balance in a case, a Sherlock Holmes case, this kind of a case, between when the people get to the end, do you just give them all the confirmation to just lock in their theory completely? And sort of the last arc is them getting all their confirmations to lock everything in place? Or do you try to design a case where when they get to the end, they've still got like a 70% versus 30% chance, and they have to pick their best theory, and they're not sure about any of their answers? And I think the the problem, the only problem that we had in this case, the part that threw me with the last set of letters was where it fit into the pacing. It was sort of like the expectation was we had gotten to the top of the pacing mountain, found our criminal, and that the next letter was going to be sort of everything locking down. Like we were going to lock down, it was Jimmy Cunningham. We were going to lock down the alibi for Lant. We were going to lock all this stuff up and get to the point where we had no more questions left. And then we would present our solution. And what happened was when we got to that last letter with the cipher and the laundromat and no alibi, I think a bunch of us were kind of like unsure where to go. Like we were more in doubt. That's what it was. We were more in doubt about our grasp of the facts after that last letter than we were the previous letter. It almost seemed like it was taunting us with these unresolved issues. And I think it would have almost been the case that if you wanted to have a kind of case where everything gets confirmed at the end, then it would have been nice to have all of those things confirmed. Like the laundromat confirmed it was his smoking jacket. The person at the hardware store confirmed it was him. The financial stuff completely confirmed that there was no crime. Or if you didn't want to have a case that confirmed all those things, then maybe we didn't even need that last letter with the encrypted messages and the break-in. If it was meant to be a case where we had to make a leap of faith and give our best guess. But I think there was something about that last set of letters that felt like they were opening up new things that we should resolve, but we couldn't resolve them. So that was the only bit of struggle I had right at the end with that last letter. I was sort of like, I don't know what to do. I don't know if there's clues in this letter that we're missing that are important, that are going to answer those questions. So it was sort of a feeling of like, what are we missing? We've got this letter, but in every other letter, we've made these big sets of progress. But this last letter, we didn't know what to do with it. We didn't know whether it was providing clues that we didn't know how to use, and we knew we couldn't follow up on these things. So we were sort of torn. Matt says, I think letter 5 was meant to challenge you. Perhaps it didn't work. It will be interesting to think about how else to end it. Perhaps you were right, but then you didn't really connect Jimmy to Hartman. Yes, it's true. We did need those last cipher messages to conclude that Cunningham was the source. That's absolutely true. We did need that. We did need that. It really is an interesting philosophical question about when players get to the end of a case, do you give them confirmatory evidence that really makes them sure of it or not? But I do think it was like the part about the smoking jacket and the laundromat. Like we really felt like we're clever. We figured out that he's going to have evidence of smoke on the jacket, and we want evidence. We need evidence to prove he's the guy. And so we sent them to check out the laundromat, and it didn't work. And it's not that the explanation doesn't make sense. It actually was nice, the explanation of why it didn't get proof, and it didn't stop us from solving the case. So I think I don't think I can argue with those choices. The only, really, I think the only trouble was just that it was the last letter. I think following up a lead that leads to a dead end like that, like the laundromat, that scene was written okay. Like even without the issue of the bribery to the laundromat, the laundromat guy didn't say no. He just said, I don't really remember people coming here with smoke. So I think having that be a dead end where we couldn't get confirmatory evidence about him cleaning his smoke-filled jacket, I think that's okay. I think the only flaw was really that it came at the end, because it's like expectations. Our expectation was that we would get the confirmatory wrap-up at the end to really prove our case. And it felt a little hard for us to end on that note without being able to find that proof, or the proof that Michael Lant had an alibi. And but on the other hand, those were realistic things. Debbie says, the laundromat was really strongly clued. I agreed with Matt that we should have gotten some evidence there. Matt says, the laundromat was just a fuck up on me. You should have gotten what you expected there. In real life, prosecutors have to make a call as to whether there is sufficient evidence to prosecute, often not 100%. Well, I definitely agree with you there. It did feel a little bit realistic. It felt nice and realistic to me that we had this arson. We knew who did it. We just couldn't say exactly why. We gave a couple theories. I think all of that was actually really good. Matt, so all of this stuff is being improvised as we play, and it's all tricky to do. But there was a sense where at some letter, maybe letter 3 or 4, we said to ourselves, it feels like we need to find the culprit and find the evidence against them and find an alibi for Michael Lant. And at the letter before the last letter, Wiggins seems to agree and be like, yeah, you should find a alibi for Michael Lant. But then it felt like at the end, Wiggins was sort of, as proxy for you, was or Jackie Hardboil actually was saying, like, he's talked to Cohen and he thinks as long as we can prove who did it, it's okay that we don't have an alibi for Lant. So I think that was handled okay, but it was a little, we wanted to find an alibi for Lant. So Debbie is asking what I was thinking, like, did you think about a way we might find an alibi for Lant and we just didn't follow up on that issue? Matt says, I dropped some clues for the alibi, but they didn't work out. The guy taking out his trash and the light on in the office were the clue I planted. Yeah, well, I mean, we saw both of those. We thought of them, but when we sent someone to his office, they wouldn't let us look around, and we didn't know who to talk to. Maybe if we had sent someone to the place next door, Matt would have, if we had tried to follow up the guy, it just seemed like the guy taking out his trash wouldn't be enough. But that might be a fault of ours. Thinking about how this kind of improv game works, if we had sent a guy to the next door building, maybe Matt would have given us an encounter where we met someone who could see. But I think we did it. I think this is the right way to do it. Like we said in our letter, maybe talk to the cleaners. Maybe someone will recognize Lant slept at the office. I do think, though, you handled that reasonably well, Matt, because at the last letter, it's not like Wiggins said, hey, you need to find an alibi for Lant. If Wiggins had said, you absolutely need to find an alibi for Lant, and then we ended the game without having found that alibi, that would be much more troubling. But I do think that was handled, that was a sort of corrective. By the time the last letter came along, Matt did make clear to us in the voice of Wiggins that it was going to be okay if we didn't find an alibi for Lant. And in fact, the story told by Wiggins and the detective all was balanced well. It just said, like, All right, well, you messed up a couple things, but just going to keep him in jail for a little bit longer. So that all worked out and was explained really well. Give up on the alibi and punish the team by leaving Lot in a cell for an extra week. Yeah, I think that actually worked out well. That actually worked out well. Now, it's lucky I didn't kill us by misunderstanding when the cop came to talk to Wiggins, because I did obviously get those dates wrong. I thought that Cunningham was planting evidence again, was telling the cops about Lant even before the fire. So, but thankfully, Matt did not try to punish us for that. I mean, we should say one of the unspoken rules of this kind of thing is that the goal is not for Matt to completely pull the wool over our eyes and have us end the case in failure. It's almost like the fix is in, right? No matter what we did, Matt was going to make sure we didn't end the case as a terrible failure. So in that sense, the fix was in a little bit, and Matt would have made sure. But that's one of the nice things about this game, that it's sort of, Matt can tune it to be harder or easier based on our progress. So yeah, okay. I want to talk a little bit about a couple of my favorite parts. I've talked about a couple of them. The turning into an arson, that's fantastic. Start the new day off. All of a sudden, it's a much more important case. That clue about the cologne was amazing. That's what I want in a mystery case. You read it the first time, you don't see it. Then you read it the second time, put it back together. So the other part that I thought, well, I love the idea of these detectives that you can hire at a cost. It doesn't take that much to psychologically make these games, make them be these agonizing decisions. And this idea that it was costing us money, who we sent, and then we had sent this guy and he was messing things up. Like, it felt like there were consequences to deciding who to send where. We could only send Alice one place. But then this character of Alice was so enjoyable to read, her doing her thing. She just felt like a real person. I don't think I had a second of doubt while we were playing that there wasn't really an Alice out there running this case, working on this case. She was completely believable. In fact, all the characters were really well done. Mrs. Lant was a tragic figure. Alice was fantastic. And just everything about, I know I was looking forward to each week hearing how Alice was getting on and what trouble she got into, drinking her coffee. Here in this letter, she wanted a real cigarette to make it look authentic. Just really, really wonderful. That says, I think I took on too much each week and should have restricted the leads. I didn't want to weigh which of your leads to follow over others, huh? Yeah, I think there's no good way. I think that maybe that has to be, as far as a system, this kind of a system, improvisational thing. I don't think the solution is for us to give you less candidate leads, because we don't really know which leads we're going to try to send you to that are going to be nothingness. So I think the way to fix it as a system is for you to just say, I'm going to ignore half of their requests. As soon as I get to a 4-page or however long I want to write my reply, I'm just going to say, I didn't have time to go here. I didn't have time to go here, because we can't restrict it on our end, because then if we give you our one place for each person and you don't really have interesting stuff to tell us there, then we've got a letter that's got nothing in it. So I think the only solution to that is for you to just decide when we've gotten enough and ignore the rest of the leads. I certainly didn't feel like, I mean, I could completely get why this was a lot to write each week. It didn't feel like it was going on long. I mean, we did have 2-hour sessions for most of our sessions, so maybe they were longer sessions than normal, but it was wonderful to have so much to read and go into. It was fun to save our expensive cop until the case got serious. That's another that's well, I guess you did intend that, because that cop, that Jackie Hardboiled, was a $2 lead. So, but that's actually a very clever, the whole money thing was a clever mechanic in general, but I think really the genius of that was that the expensive guy got saved. I think that really was one of the highlights of that system, that we were like, we're not spending $2 a lead. We're not spending $2 a lead on a card game. When there's a murder, we brought him in. Debbie says, I think for Matt's sake, we do need a hard limit of leads, not necessarily per person, but definitely per week. Well, that's the part I'm disagreeing with. I don't think that limit is best put on the players. I think the players should prioritize what's important, and then the author, Matt, can decide which ones he wants to handle each week. And just either for the other ones say, I went there, there's nothing. I went there, there's nothing. Or just say, I didn't have time for this. So if we prioritize, and then Matt can give us the ones that are higher on our list and just reject. But maybe it should be maybe more of an emphasis on the fact that Matt can just outright reject requests. That's sort of an implicit thing. You don't have to go to all the places that we said to go to. In fact, you could even just say, Vernon was called away that week, so he didn't get a chance to do that. I think Matt should have more freedom to dismiss our requests, and then we can try to push for it later. But I still think better safe than sorry, better for the players, us, to give you more leads to choose from to answer, and then you have more freedom to reject them. Matt says, there were a couple of weeks I got overwhelmed. For the most part, I really enjoyed writing all of this content. Well, I mean, if you look at how much Matt has written, it's kind of crazy. I mean, it really is extraordinary how much. When we look at these Dear Holmes cases, it's 3 pages, and then for 4 sessions. Well, we probably played 20 hours on this case, but each letter got longer and longer. There was a lot that got written for this case on 2 days notice. And then Debbie helped with the editing, which I know from my experience, because Debbie has helped edit my cases, makes a huge difference having Debbie on the case. And but so much work went into this. It is so appreciated. I know this is a special experience on this channel. It is very much appreciated. I think we should all give Matt a round of applause in our private rooms watching. Really a special experience. I can't tell you how happy I am, how lucky I feel that we got to share this together, and I really am appreciative of Matt's time and his skill. I mean, the writing here was really extraordinary, and what a finale. It sort of there was a bit of everything in this letter, in this last finale. Couldn't have asked for better. I really appreciate it, Matt. Well, what an experience. And we've got more stocks. I'm going to be a rich man at the end of this. All right. Well, let's wrap it up here. We could talk about it more in the Discord. Matt is around in the Discord if you have questions for him. Anna says, I can definitely understand the overwhelming nature of this format. I wouldn't even try to attempt this. Applause for Matt. If you're just watching this, you can watch our previous Sherlock Holmes improv case run by Matt. And at the end of that, Matt and I talked on camera through Zoom. And so you can listen to Matt talk about his creation of the previous case as well. What an experience. Will we do another one of these in another year or two? Only Matt knows. Next week, I will do a game design diary on the progress in New York Noir, and we'll talk about other things, other directories that got made for the game, updates to the web software, and if this kind of project looks interesting to you, maybe stop by the Discord. Someone wants to write a new case inspired by Matt's work, or write a classic case for New York Noir. I am ready to help. Okay, what a joy. I'll see you all next week. Maybe we'll play a puzzle game first, maybe some Seventh Citadel, then we'll get back to some classic Sherlock Holmes consulting detective, maybe another fan case soon. Thank you for joining me. I'll see you next time. Matt, thank you again.